Enjoy. Your face is
Oh,
about to be on YouTube,
we're,
Alex.
Oh,
we're,
okay.
I've never done this before, so we'll see if I'm
we're,
successful.
we're doing it. Awesome.
We're doing it.
Yay.
Enjoy. Your face is about to be on YouTube, Alex. Now I've got to turn that off.
There is a lot.
Okay, it's happening. We're on YouTube. There's
Awesome.
gonna be nobody watching because I don't think I have any subscribers. I'm just kind of learning YouTube still. Um, but yeah, now live on your channel, Swarm Session, writing through it. I do feel like this session, regardless of how many people we do have
Yeah.
come be present here, is really, really important for almost everybody that I work with. In a way,
Wow.
the conversation of healing comes up. And
Mm.
I've thought, I've thought quite a bit about like if there's some type of course that I should take as a writing coach where like it helps me help people with their trauma more. Like I know some people take certain therapy courses where like they're not becoming a therapist, but they like, look at a community college to take some classes, things like that.
Right.
So maybe Amy, if you wanted to kick it off by kind of just telling us like how did you get to become an expert in this? Like where did your passion come from in this? Yeah, like why are you the perfect person to give this presentation?
It's funny because I think of myself as an expert in sort of different ways where I have a lot of lived experience with writing from my own trauma and have developed like book series from that doing that.
Mhm.
So I have that like thing that I can point to that I say, oh, I have the proof that this works, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the same time, I also have the experience of just having done it for a very long time and not really giving up on it and not
Yeah.
being like, I hate this, I don't want to do it anymore kind of thing, and being like, oh, this is actually beneficial to me therapeutically and has been like over the course, I'd say maybe like 20 plus years. Um, Specifically, the three-book series that the one three-book series that's out is actually a dystopian sci-fi, which I developed initially out of what I would probably consider like traumatic conversations and experiences I had around like things I was seeing occur in society. And I said on a podcast recently that like it was kind of prophetic in a way that little like upsets me a little bit because like the way that the world is going in some ways, it's like I almost like I was like I didn't want these things to happen, so I wrote about them like don't let these things happen as like a warning. So like just knowing that that's out there, it's like, please read this and learn from it. And I had created characters that weren't me, that
Mhm.
weren't the people I knew, but they came out of these experiences that I had. And the main character that I developed was like a version of me, but she had a lot of things that happened to her and the way that she responded to certain experiences. Um, I give a trauma talk. I gave a trauma talk recently last month in two different like capacities.
Mhm.
Um, I am a member of the Neurodivergent Clubhouse. I just want to throw that out there because I have that neurodivergent lived experience.
Mhm.
And that came out of writing the three-book series and writing a neurodivergent character and realizing I was as well. Kind of like a weird meta thing that
Oh,
happened.
did that happen like in real time
I know.
about
It's
yourself
like,
and learning about your
yeah, it took
character?
like three books to be like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, why do I relate to this? Why do I have all this stuff?
Amazing. It's like your subconscious was like,
Yeah. Exactly. And then at the Contemporary Romance Writers Conference,
Mhm.
recently gave a talk about writing trauma ethically. And I came at it from the perspective of writing about other people's trauma. Um, and I put that in quotation marks because it's like to be careful sourcing that kind of thing for story's sake and being ethical about it and not trivializing the trauma or, like hurting your audience by, you know what I'm saying, by sensationalizing something that was very difficult for them.
Mhm.
So I've come at this from like all different angles.
Mhm.
And the romance writing summit actually wanted me to talk on that topic. and I had never done it before, because I always came at it from that neurodivergent lens and that lived experience lens of like, I'm writing my own trauma, I'm sourcing my own trauma, but I don't even know that I'm doing it. I'm just writing, you know? I'm like dumping what's in my brain onto the page. So I had to do a lot of research around writing trauma ethically if I'm writing about someone else's, which I feel like is a really difficult thing to accomplish well, like in a nuanced, way that
Yeah.
feels right. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm just doing this to fulfill some sort of like trope, you know? So, so again, we can go in a lot of different directions, but I know that my wheelhouse really is writing from my own trauma and then helping other people sort of realize the benefits of doing that and not shying away from it. So,
Do you have some resources to share about when you said you did a lot of research on writing about trauma ethically? Was there
yeah.
like books that come to mind or anything that you recommend? Where did you
They
do your research?
I mean, I mostly just did a lot of research on sensitivity reading,
Oh,
and what sensitivity readers look for,
yep.
and what writers should avoid doing. It really came out like I had my presentation be like, this is what you shouldn't do, and then this is what you should do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So just laying that out there. Um, I have a book. I'm spacing the name now, but it's a psychology workbook for writers, and I did talk about that a little
Oh,
bit. It's like uh the writer, I think Darian Smith is the name. I might be wrong now. I can look it up and send it
if
in the
you see me
email.
looking off the screen. So, yeah.
But uh, they talk a lot about looking at trauma in all different directions before you even attempt to um, write about it in a way, like really learning the nuances of like the stages of grief
Hmm.
or before you start writing about a character who's grieving,
I see.
um, because everyone grieves differently and everyone responds to those traumatic experiences differently. So if you just kind of make up in your head how you think they might respond, and it's not something that readers will relate to, he shows you different ways to like avoid that. So that was a pretty good resource that I
I
used.
just added it to my TBR
Did
on.
I say it right? The name?
Yeah. That's how I
Okay.
found it.
Okay, good. I was
Um,
afraid I was going to say the wrong name.
no, you said it totally right. I love it. I think that's excellent. And then you were kind of going into another train of thought, and now I
Oh,
had a
that's okay.
question for that, and now I kind of forgot what it was. Um, shoot. Alex, what is your main genre that you write?
Literary fiction, sometimes magic realism, a lot of times magic realism.
Okay, so writing about other people's trauma is probably what comes up for you a lot in attending the session because of your
Yeah,
characters, would be my guess.
that's that's kind of what I'm looking at to an extent. I mean, sometimes my main characters tend to be fairly too close or closer to me than I'd like them to be.
Mm.
But primarily, at least in my current work in progress, it is how to enrich my story. Not say that was about to sound terrible. How to enrich my story through trauma, but how to, when I'm incorporating certain aspects of, especially grief and loss, how to, yeah, make that seem more authentic.
That's a really good topic, but I did want to speak on just one thing and sort of get it out of the way because it does come up a lot in these conversations. Because I feel like depending on where a writer is coming from and how they feel like their process evolves, going from like idea to story and then like everything that happens in between, writers feel like sometimes they go in different directions depending on the genre they write or what they feel like they've learned to get to this point as a writer, if that makes sense. And there's really like kind of two different kinds of writing that can occur, which is you have the sort of the escapist writing where you attempt to go like way far out of your comfort zone and create worlds, build fantastical characters, which is awesome. I love all of that. Um, but like almost in an effort to be like, I want what I create to be nothing like me. So I'm using it as escapism. Like, no judgment, it's just something we do in an effort to avoid what I think a lot of writers think is bad writing, which is this self-insertion approach. Um, where if when you look at a lot of like memoir and things like that, that you feel like it could be it's a very much like a self-insert where you could see how the writer is the main character from beginning to end with no like nuances or changes. And since we really that can feel really uncomfortable doing that, and we feel like that's very strictly creative nonfiction memoir, that world, that we try to avoid it that much. So what I like to talk about, and we can go in lots of different directions, I like to take like an approach where you kind of do both at the same time. In a way to not like avoid one or the other. So my experience with that is if you're doing this, the memoirist self-insert diary entry kind of writing, I think you can often limit yourself in the worlds you can create and the characters you can create and the plot lines and the stories. But I also think that if you go too far escapist, that you can lose sort of that authenticity of, these characters don't feel real or whatever comes up for you when you're writing it. You're like, this doesn't feel something about this feels off or whatever. That's often because the effort has been put too much in that escapism, in the complete avoidance of yourself. And so something from you is lost, like almost like your voice starts to get muddy. So if we are be able if we see both approaches as valid, then we're able to make sort of work to do them both simultaneously. And there's different ways to do that. You don't necessarily have to be world building while you're trauma dumping. Like it's almost like an impossible thing to do. But I have, ideas and exercises and things on what how you can do that.
Can we talk about trauma dumping a little bit and
Yeah.
just like how to gauge when it's becoming what's the line? When do we become to the dumping point?
Right. So the idea is sometimes it's another way of changing our mindset around the writing process. So we have to think, you know, as writers, we know that there is a process. We know there's those early stages of getting the idea on the page and the ugly first draft and the notebooks and the scribbles and the post-it notes or whatever your your thing is. And then there's the finished product. And we know that there's like a vast chasm between those two things. There's edits, there's rewrites, there's beta readers, you
Mhm.
know, all of that. And often the reader just sees the finished product. They just see all that polish and that hard work and all the outside influences.
Mhm.
But when I talk about that trauma dumping, which is really, I guess, one of the best ways to explain it, is it's really that's like your sacred idea, like your early writing, like the stuff that no one else is going to read yet.
Mhm.
Like even you could even call it ugly,
Mhm.
like the ugly writing where um I mean, and like I said, I know that I worked with someone who hand wrote everything that they had and in like perfect cursive from like the moment it came out of their brain. And I can appreciate that as a skill, but I've never been able to do that. Like I can't, like I have to have those weird scribbles all over the place and the notes and the drawings and the diagrams. You know what I'm saying? And then have that as like that's when I dump everything.
Mhm.
And then and then later through the rewrites and the edits, then I go through and I say, is this too much? Do I really need this? Is
Mhm.
this scene move the plot forward? All of those things that we have to think about.
Yeah.
So think of it as just like note taking, but like instead of listening to someone else lecture you, you're like lecturing yourself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Mhm. Oh, Monty's here too.
Yay, welcome.
Hey.
Hi, Monty. We're talking about a lot of things, but what you walked in on or joined in on was we were kind of talking about trauma dumping and deciding if it's Monty, you're not a novelist like Alex is, but Monty is a creative, and so she deals, this is beneficial for her as well. And
Wow.
maybe when we say something is valid to stay in a manuscript because it's moving the plot forward, like we'll keep that trauma in the plot because it's moving it forward. Monty, the same thing I think kind of works with storytelling and with as being a creative and representing these brands and these companies and doing their outreach. As
Mhm.
long as it's, I guess, essentially what you're saying is as long as it's serving a purpose, then it's not considered, dumping as much, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Right. So even from that perspective of saying you're writing copy for a company and like you want, but you're building a story, you still want the story to be moving and maybe from the business owner's perspective of like something they went through that helped them get their idea for their business and then they're successful as a result. That's a really great story to tell. But there might be things that the business owner may need to go through specifically and be like, oh, I have to think about that time that I tried to get a business loan and I didn't get it, or I had, my grandmother said I never amount to anything or whatever. And like you have to wade through all of that information and you have to decide, okay, what really is useful to this end result and this end product. So again, I feel like in a sense, in order to get the good stuff, you have to kind of wade through all the bad stuff too. Like you have to make sure that you get everything out.
Mhm.
And then you can cherry pick, I think, as a result of knowing that you've gotten everything out of you. But there's an important aspect to that that I talk about a lot, which is sometimes the act of writing it down can be therapeutic in
Mhm.
itself. Just giving a voice to it is therapeutic. You might not even ever do anything with it. Like
Mhm.
you might, write about an experience you had in childhood, and then that gives you an idea that, oh, well, this other thing that happened when I was an adult, I think would be a more important thing for me to write about. But you wouldn't have had that realization if you hadn't written that other thing.
Yeah.
So again, it's always useful in some way, even if it's not
Yeah.
the end result.
Yeah. And I wish Connie was here. She's a Hive Collective member. And she's actually one of the people that was like, oh my gosh, I really wish I could be there, but I think she's still working at this time. So she was gonna watch the recording, but
Awesome.
her writing a memoir and it does have a lot of trauma in it. And there was a point when she was like, I don't know what belongs and what doesn't. What's your vision? And I was like, well,
Mm,
you need to start with just writing all of it. But
right.
something that we talked about early in her journey of, writing all of it. And then we would go through and, like you said, cherry pick out what is moving the plot forward. Um, she was making sure that and I don't know if she did or not, but we talked about making sure that, she did have an outlet outside of this writing because it was going to bring up some hard things. And
Right.
so, like, the healing process is not linear. So it's not going to always feel better after she wrote about this. There were times when she really had to pause in her writing because she got to some of the parts of her life that, it took a lot more out of her emotionally. It made her tired. It made her dread sitting down to write. And um, she was getting worried about her word count because she was like, I'm not really, this really slowed me down and I'm dreading work writing and things like that. And I was like, it doesn't have to be this linear thing, but in the end, you do need to make sure you're kind of checking in with yourself, seeing how your body feels, seeing how your heart feels as you're going through this, because there was a lot of things that came up for her as she was writing through her whole life story. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's very common. And I speak about that a lot actually in a talk I do for neurodivergent writers because they've got a whole other, amount of things that they're feeling and ways that they need to cope. And they're the first ones often to be like, I can't do this. Like I can't like touch this. Like this feels hard. And I often say like, oh, that's how you know you're getting there. Like you kind of have to like, you're pedaling up that hill and your legs are starting to burn and you know that like if you just keep going, you'll get to the top of the hill, but you want to stop because it hurts and it's,
Yeah.
hard. And that's the kind of thing where it's like not necessarily push through the pain, but sometimes you have to take that moment. Yeah, often with them, I say, you need to take a breath. I learned a really good breathing exercise because I'm actually really bad at this, like breathing. I don't know what is breathing, but if you if you put up your hand and you move your finger along, yeah, your thumb and all your other fingers. You take a deep breath in and you take a deep breath out. You take a deep breath in, you take a deep breath out. And it just, for me, it helps me remind like how long I need to breathe and how many times. Because if we just say breathe, you're like, ah, okay, I breathed. I don't feel better. So that's kind of a thing that you can think about is always like take that time, pause, feel what you're feeling because the avoidance of that feeling is where we go into that escapist mode sort of thing where it's just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I'm not good at this. I'm going to go back to writing what I'm good at and I'm going to
Mhm.
stop this. And like, I just don't think we grow as writers when we only do what feels comfortable. That's my opinion. I know people tend to disagree, but I know I also do another talk on writing across genres, which I know a lot of people are like, whoa, like I have my genre. I don't know. I don't want to try other things. And it's all that whole other, that's another thing is like, well, just try it. Like you don't have to commit to it. You don't have to completely change genres overnight, but just have fun with it. Use it as a creative exercise. See if you can do it. You might end up liking it. You don't know. So it's just another one of those things. It's like just give it a shot. See what happens. Give it time too, because like in my experience, is this took years and years of trial and error to finally get to the point where I was like, I think I know what I'm doing now, kind of. But as writers, we never really know what we're doing. I mean, let's be honest. It's always a
Never know what we're doing
learning
until
curve.
the book is done. That's
Yeah.
what Stephen King's like. The books write themselves. I'm like, wow, that must be nice. So how did that work out?
They
It worked
probably
out
figured
really
it
well
out.
for you. Not all of us, though.
Yeah, I know. They say it gets easier, but we'll see.
I think our habits, I think we get better with our habits.
Yes,
And that's really, really helpful in writing. Habits and rituals are a really big part of writing.
very true.
Something that I think that we should talk about while you're on the call is sensitivity readers, because that already
Mm.
came up once. And
Yeah.
I think that it is one of those terms that I find very common. I see it a lot, but then some people have never heard of it before or
Mhm.
understand why they need it. So, oh, and hi, Vin. Um,
Um,
I sent an email out because I feel like some people maybe, I don't know if maybe the Zoom registration was a little funky, but people might trickle in a little bit. But I sent a reminder to all the everybody that registered. But that being said, yeah, let's talk about sensitivity readers, what that is, how, best practices to use them, where to find them, all the good stuff.
Yeah, so I know there are a lot of people out there who like do it as a living now. Just the same as people are editors and you can find them on Upwork and you can find them on Fiverr. I mean, you can find them anywhere. Readsy. So they used to be more difficult to find or people used to think, well, I'll ask my friend. And if my if my friend's not offended, then that's probably not going to offend anyone else. So I don't think that that's the best course of action at this
Yeah.
point. I think especially if um like if you want to go the route of finding a very skilled um sensitivity reader, then there are websites, there are directories, and you can find them. They probably charge a fee because, like I said, people know that they're good at it. And the thing is, though, I think you should think of all of your readers in a way as sensitivity readers, but you should always prepare them. So, like, I have an arc that I just dropped for another series that I'm going to be putting out, totally different, like urban fantasy going in a different direction. But I have like all of my content warnings, like all of my trigger warnings, like straight up in the beginning. And it's like I need to know that the people who are reading this are going to be okay with reading the things that are in this. And then, and a good gauge for that is if they're like, nah, I pass, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I need to like reevaluate like, how much people are, want to experience these things, in the writing. So again, like for the sensitivity reading specifically, I think that you can find like a lot of readers who read for like the LGBT community. I think that a lot of sensitivity reading came out of that, and the BIPOC community, that because I think the own voices movement was, I think, really important, and I think trauma can definitely fall into that a little bit too. Is like we don't really want to go out of our way to be writing about other people's trauma and not our own. Just like we don't want to always be trying to write other people's lived experience and not our own. So again, finding those sensitivity readers and being like, I'm not trying to write stereotypes. I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings and take their voice from them. So help me out, That's what you want to be asking them to
And
find.
I like what you said about them being often paid because it
Yeah,
feels, especially as a white woman, it feels unethical to be, if you're in a place that you need to use a sensitivity reader,
right.
you're likely not in a place to be asking the sensitivity reader to do free labor. And so, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what this is. It's emotional labor. And
Yeah,
it's like labor in the sense of the word. It's they're using their time, they're using their expertise to probably prepare some type of feedback for you, whether it's just a conversation or maybe some type of brief. I think a sensitivity reader would do a little bit of a more brief report than say like a developmental editor or something. But
right.
um, they're still putting something together that you're going to benefit from. And I think it's really, I heard you say that and I just wanted to um, kind of reiterate that that's a really, really important part of is or same thing with like beta readers, ARC readers, all kinds of things. I mean, I guess with an ARC you can't truly compensate, but you are giving them the book for free in exchange for an honest review. So
Right.
just finding ways to compensate folks for their time and energy is just so important to me. I'm a big advocate for that.
I agree. I agree. And even if you have like a very skilled developmental editor and you even want them to do read through, as I know mine is good at that, where in in my ask of her, when I say, hey, I'm sending this over to you, chapter 12 is really heavy. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Uh, So when you read over it, let me know what you think. If you feel overwhelmed or you feel like, I've gone too far or whatever. But like I said, I'm coming from a place where often I'm writing about things that have happened to me, or in another way, just things I've experienced is probably a better way to say it. Um, and so I don't feel sort of that I'm walking that tightrope of like, am I going to offend someone else who's been through this because I've been through it? So, you know what I'm saying? So taking that ownership a little bit is one of the hardest things I think in the beginning too, when you're first writing it out, because I know a lot of people fear like people getting their hands on it and then people they know reading it and being like, ugh, like, how dare you, or whatever reaction they're going to have. People get in their own head about it a lot, and it stops them from telling their own story. Um, and we know that. We know how important it is to tell stories that are difficult to tell and that
Mhm.
need to be out there because, I mean, especially in different cultures have stories where, things have been whitewashed because people were uncomfortable about talking about them. But it's like you're erasing history when you do that. So let them be uncomfortable. Like this needs to be out there. People need to know about this. It's the same. I feel like it's the same thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can share your thoughts on that. I don't want to speak
No,
for
no,
everyone.
I'm totally agreeing with everything that you're saying.
Okay.
Um, I'm curious, but I don't know if Vin is in a place to come off mute, and if not, that's okay. But we already talked to Alex about his writing. I know, and if Monty, you want to correct me on anything I said about the writing that you do and the creation that you do. I'm curious what kind of genre Vin maybe writes. If I don't know if they're in a place to even come off mute. Some people are driving and doing all kinds of things. So
Right.
um, we spoke a little bit about Alex writing fiction, and part of working through trauma is sometimes we identify with our characters. And what you said at the beginning, Amy, that I meant to ask about, and I thought was kind of interesting, is you said that you had multiple characters. That I think my understanding was you had multiple characters that each had a kind of a different part of things that you work through or things that resonated with you.
Yeah.
So Amy's not a character in the book, but there's each person kind of has a part of Amy. And I really, really think that's beautiful. And that's like one really powerful way that we can use our passion for writing as a unique way to heal, a unique, innovative way to heal, maybe.
That is an approach again with that came out of me creatively playing with different ways of doing it, and I have done it in a lot of different ways. I think the way that most people just automatically go to is that first person writing of yourself, inserting yourself as the protagonist, and then deciding how closely you want to mirror yourself to the protagonist, and are you providing yourself enough distance? And then, when you're thinking about all these things, then you start thinking about the shifting perspectives, and that helps develop the writing and make it a lot more nuanced, than in just like, I'm the good guy and you're the villain in the end. Like, so, but it's an interesting place to start because I do often tell people to start there when they feel like they have something they need to say. And then within the story, that 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 can come out. I mean, the point of the story, like the theme behind it, can often be this is the thing that happened, or this is what can happen as a result of this thing happening, or we just have to keep in mind that, like, if we're, super racist, then these things can occur. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
like, it comes out of those experiences, but then it becomes this bigger thing that's bigger than we are. And I feel like you can even create worlds based on the trauma, which I talk about is always like shocking to people, but they like it's not just about making people who reflect people we know or ourselves. Um, I think the sci-fi dystopian series that I had kind of has this where there's uh, buildings and worlds and planets and experiences and groups of people that are sort of representative of things. So
Yeah.
they can become these sort of fictionalized symbolic things that kind of like take on these real world experiences and they like reshape them into
Yeah.
something else, you know?
It's kind of reminding me, that's making me think of the Grace Year. Even
Yeah.
like even like Lord of the Flies. And it's just so many books that aren't um in our worlds, but they they sometimes echo
Hmm.
actual injustice that happens in our world. So it helps us unpack it and maybe see it a little bit differently. Um, and I think that
That's
happens probably more than we realize. Sorry, Alex, what were you saying?
that's didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I was
Mm.
gonna say that's why I love and I tend to work within kind of speculative fiction. Anywhere from magic realism, dipping into some more fantasy tropes because yeah, I mean, as you were saying before, there's that level of escapism that you might not want to go all the way into, but fantasy or speculative fiction at its best is always reflecting back reality and just exploring how do you take these abstract concepts and literalize them.
And I would love to speak to that because I feel like it does exactly that when it's done really well and it's done with thought. And I feel like what tends to sometimes happen is I think people sort of take the easy route where they say, "Oh, I just want to have these things in my world." They don't really represent anything, but I just like to write about swords and fancy dresses and kings and queens and stuff because that's what I like. And that's fine. It's just that you can't, that's not really the approach that you're taking when you're taking sort of a more nuanced approach of like, what what does the sword fight represent? What, why have we set it in this time period and why are these people fighting and what's beneath that? Then it's when I think we come away from a story and go, wow, that was like so good. I can't like put my finger on why that was so moving and so good and so authentic, and that's why what you just described is that the writer took that extra step to go beyond the superficial.
Monty had a question in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, and thank you for answering that. I feel like it's the same, but vice versa, I guess. Sometimes with characters, when you're reading, or when I guess when I'm reading, not you're reading, but when I'm reading, you can get lost into characters. How do y'all not put so much, or how do you not get lost in one character, but you have like five other characters in a book, and they also have to have time.
Mm.
I have to comprehend, or the reader has to comprehend, like, oh, this is the mother talking, or this is the friend. Um, and I know some books sometimes go back in time. How
Mm.
do you not, like, I just want to know y'all's thought process on everything.
Because
Maintain the authenticity of the storytelling. That's where I'm trying to.
again, with like moving our plot forward.
Right.
And especially when there's like a lot of trauma to unpack or a lot of depth to these characters, it is hard to know who to really build out to be a what do they say in like in middle school, the round character and a flat character.
Hmm. Yeah, they have to, again, like I think that's when we have that original trauma dump and we go, okay, I'm the main character and these are the villains in my story and these are the things the villains did and this is how the main character copes. It's like that's you telling yourself the story. That's not the story. And so the thing that you end up reading, I believe, when you get the book in hand, is something I hope that came out of the author being like, okay, well, why is the villain the way that they are? And why is the antagonist trying to help the villain defeat the protagonist? And why does the protagonist have this inner struggle where they feel inferior to the villain or all those things and they've thought about all that stuff and so what you're reading is the result of like this is what they're trying to get across to you and so when you say if you want to specify a little more like what you mean by getting lost, like do you feel as a reader that you get lost in the story?
Um, so I don't know. I don't have the book here next to me. Um, Where is it? It's not near me.
It's
There's
okay.
one book that I can send it in the group or send it to Brooke. But it has like 17 characters, and sometimes I'm like, whoa.
That's a
Um,
lot.
and that's also, you got to take notes and things like that. But how do you process that when you're writing? Because you could just stay focused on one character because maybe you're feeling the moment and their story, or I don't know what the thought process is with writing novels and storylines, but that's where I'm at. It's just to pick your brain a little bit, all of y'all's brains.
Well, just first off, like if I were to have 17 characters in my book, I would, and they all have a unique POV and they all have a story, and they're not just side characters or people who like are, in the same bar that my main character's in. Um, it I feel like then I hope I went through the trouble of figuring out why each one is important and that I didn't go like, oh, maybe I can combine character A and character B and character C and character D into like, two people instead of four. So like, I feel like if you're potentially if you're feeling overwhelmed as a reader, then maybe the writer didn't like go take that extra step in taking the time to say, okay, maybe 17 characters is too many. Like, I don't know. That's just my thought process. I don't know if you share my thoughts, Brooke, but.
Mhm. No, I do. I think a lot of times, your first draft as well, like you're not going to have that right balance of who shows up, what amount is that right for the reader. Are we giving the reader information about this character that they need to know, or are we just building out the character, or are we giving them too much and they're going to get lost in that character? But I mean, that's why we have drafts, and that's why we have beta readers and people and editors that come in and they say, hey, you were building out this character for so long, or you added all these details or scenes about this character that it really slowed down the pacing and didn't move the plot forward. None of this is actually relevant. And my rule of thumb, I've heard it a million times, and it's one of the most basic things to come back to is anytime you write a scene, is everybody that's in the scene serving the scene. So if you're writing a scene where they're at a dinner party and there's four people sitting at the table that serve no purpose, they do not need to be there. They do not need to be written into the scene. People don't like that because in real life, that's not how it goes, right? Like
Right.
we sometimes do have people just sitting in the background and sometimes somebody sitting in the background quietly does serve a purpose. Maybe they're sitting there uncomfortably while people are fighting in front of them or something. But also that there's times where that just kind of clutters it up. And then you have those, 17 characters. And I don't know what book you're reading. I don't want to poo-poo on what that
Right.
that author is doing. Maybe there is a purpose. I remember one of my favorite books in middle school to read was The Westing Game, and we had to have a notebook and have a page for each character, and we kind of built a character Bible to keep track of what was happening with each character. Um, but I think that's more of the exception than the most common way to write. People don't usually have that many characters. If they do, hopefully there's a purpose. In the end, it just comes back to purpose. Are they serving the story? Yes. Is this fact about them serving the story or building their character purposefully? Yes. Keep it. No, cut it.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
Moxie, that's whenever you start hearing the phrase to murder your darlings.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
That's what
Not
the
hard.
author
I was gonna
says. They're
say,
like,
when do
don't
you
make me
stop
murder my
it?
darlings.
I was gonna say that too. When do you know it's coming to an end? Like, how do y'all cut it off mentally when you're
The
writing?
end of the book.
Mhm.
Is that
Well,
the scene, the book, the chapter?
any of it. Any
I
of it.
I I always, I'll be honest, that was something I struggled with. Ending the book was always hard for me. It's a skill because, you ha at some point you have to figure out, okay, is this a perpetual diary entry from my heart, or is this something someone else is going to read and enjoy?
Mhm.
And you have to take, like I said, those different things into consideration where I developed a system that does not work for every brain, but like I said, mine is unique. So I usually, when I get to like the middle, where a lot of people start to like slow down and start to get like, oh, where's this going? I don't know. Like, even if they have a very detailed outline, sometimes that can help when they get to like the murky middle. I like
Mhm.
to I like to jump to the end and write the ending and
Mm,
then work my way backwards.
that's really smart. I really like that actually.
But because I did that out of a necessity of like just writing and writing and writing until I just got tired. And
Yeah.
that's not when you want to stop. When
Yeah.
you're just
And
like, hate
I
your
think
book.
often what we learn the hard way as writers is that we do usually have to cut it off before we think we're ready. And
Yeah.
that's what really leaves people lingering after the last page. And they're like, oh my God, like I fell in love with that character. I want more of that. And that's almost
Yeah.
why I'm sometimes, a lot of times, hesitant to read books that are series, me personally. Not because I think they're any like if that they're not as good of quality or anything like that. I'm not a fantasy person, so fantasy is usually it has the most series out of any genre. But I think sometimes people are unable to realize when a story should end.
Mm.
It's okay to leave everybody wanting more. We don't love it, but it makes us love the book.
Mm.
In that weird, like that weird like self harmful way where we're like, oh,
Yeah.
I love that so much and now it's over and now I like have a book hangover. But if you leave your characters having, or you leave your readers having a book hangover, you did your job really well. If you keep going on and on and on until your readers aren't reading anymore,
Hmm.
I mean, they're not going to keep recommending you as an author. So sometimes it's okay to end it before you think everyone's ready. I mean, conclude it. You don't need
Right.
to leave things on a cliffhanger if it's not a series. That would be insane. But you can still cut it off. You don't have to resolve every single thing. You need a big resolution
Yeah.
and have your readers trust that the character, like if it's a coming of age memoir, have a big, tie it with a bow at the end, have a resolution, but trust that the character is going to go on to continue healing. They've come to a place that they've solved this huge conflict. They're going to go on the rest of their life healing and continuing to have their happily ever after. Um,
Right. And to that point, when I did the talk for the contemporary romance writers, I know that, it's very popular. It's an imperative to have a happy ending for a romance book. That's just a rule that they abide by. And I, you know, I can write a happy ending, I'll say, and I have, but like what I tried to show them is sort of looking at a different nuanced way where you can have your happy ending, but that doesn't mean the healing is done and the trauma is over and that they're no longer human beings that face trials and difficulties in life. You don't because that can feel kind of sappy, and that's like why I think some people avoid writing happy endings because they don't want the pretty bow of like everything's better. It's not a fairy tale. It's like a story of two people, like two like nuanced people. And I think I just sort of like push that out there because um that it can be too easy to resolve. It resolves things too easily, if that makes sense. Like
yeah, does it feel realistic?
yeah, and one of the things I said for them to shy away from is that the happy ending isn't necessarily them meeting the love of their life and then that curing all the ills, you
Hmm.
know, that in an effort to like, they met the love of their life and also, their mother died or their goldfish died or whatever it is, whatever, something less serious, but like they have to still go through these things and life doesn't just end and they haven't been rescued. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I could go on for hours on that topic, but
Yeah. And I think tying it back to our topic of this session, like
yeah,
you writing the happy ending might be part of the healing process.
yeah,
And also, you can keep in mind what I said earlier, where we can write our draft and then we can, like, an editor might still have you cut back and say, like, we're not going to end it, at the wedding whenever everyone's remarried and healed from after this, traumatic divorce. We're actually going to end the book whenever the character found that she was feeling healed from the divorce and she got her life back in order and maybe we end the book when she just first meets her new boyfriend. Like we don't need to follow it all the way through to the day that she dies in her husband's loving arms. We need to
right,
solve the purpose of the book. The character arc needs to go like this. It doesn't go like this and then like that. So
right.
it also depends on the genre. uh,
Exactly.
Genres have different patterns and story arcs um and that being said, also what I tell everybody is there's also no rules too. So and we have all these rules that we follow, but I mean
Yeah.
you're not going to go to jail for ending a romance
Writer jail.
without a happy ending. You might not get good reviews,
I
but
know, exactly.
it depends on your audience and genre and who you are and your style, but some of the best writers that we read do something very unconventional. So
Yeah.
it's okay to play around with things too. I don't
And I
want
come,
I never want
yeah,
anyone to feel like there's like a rule that they have to follow to be a writer.
because that's the thing. That's the kind of the world that I come from is doing things that are unconventional, like even things that are satirical, like because you can write, you go through the hard work of writing the trauma and then you can maybe spin it to be funny.
Yeah.
Like that's something you can do. You can write something satirical and that's something that takes a lot of skill. Um, but I know that, like you said, we run into things where there's reader expectations and there's genre rules that I think have a tendency to pigeonhole the writing a little bit. But like I said, I feel like that's a relatively new thing and just like in marketing and not necessarily in like the world of actually writing the thing.
Yeah. Sometimes those books that are pigeonholed, though, they're easier to market, and some of them market really well. Like romance readers love tropes. They don't care if they've read 100 Grumpy Sunshine books. Some of them are like, that's my thing. That's what I read.
I
I'm
like,
reading it because it's going to follow this pattern. It's the same reason people watch Hallmark movies. It follows a pattern that makes them feel comfortable. You don't have a lot of anxiety when you watch a Hallmark movie, not because you know exactly like everything that's going to happen, but you know that you're going to feel this type of way doing it. You're emotionally safe watching it. And that's why some genres do follow, certain conventions because people want to escape. Sometimes we're living in so much trauma that we don't want to read about more trauma. I don't want to read about genocide right now because half of our world's going through it. Like,
yeah.
so it's just so interesting, all of the layers in it and the ways that we can avoid what we feel like is avoiding healing, which would be totally escaping from it, but maybe that is our healing. And so also maybe sometimes writing through our trauma is what is going to heal also. But sometimes you need a break from that. So that's why we have genres. That's why we have
Yep.
more than one writer on the planet. That's why we have a lot of things.
Yeah, and again, that is another way of, healing from the trauma is working towards a way of writing so that we're not completely focused on the trauma anymore, and we can use writing as like a fun creative play, like play therapy is fun.
Mhm.
It's not dealing with all the difficult things that you usually
Yeah.
deal with. But what I like to just remind people is that I just think that they often get caught up in this idea where it's like, because the end result is publication, because the end result is pleasing an audience, they lose the inner work of pleasing themselves on
Mhm.
some level. Like they lose that power. They become disempowered around the writing, and they they people please a little too much. I don't want to say it that
Yeah.
way, but that they should use that power in the beginning and reclaim it and wield it how they see fit in those early creative stages. And I
Mhm.
just like I feel like I often have to sort of push people back into like wanting to do what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we only have a couple of minutes left, and I should have reminded you sooner about
That's okay.
the questions that did come in. I think we've touched on all three of them, or two of the three. I think there was just one that maybe we could speak to for a moment. Is it easier for you to write in first person when writing about your trauma? And we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but maybe just add to it a little bit more before we
Yeah.
get off.
Yeah, I'd love to. The idea is the long and short of it is yes. Like when you first start out writing, it sort of is a diary entry, and you can it can more easily come out of you in first person. But that's not to say that you're married to that point of view. Just because you drafted it in first person doesn't mean that it continues to be first person. You can figure out ways to develop it and rewrite it in a sense where maybe one day it shows up, there's an omniscient narrator suddenly who's narrating what's going on. And then, you know, so like I said, whatever you attempt to do in the beginning does not mean that you're stuck with that. So, but it
Mhm.
does work in a sense to just sit down, time yourself for 15 minutes, and just write without thinking about what you're writing. And you may be like, I don't know what to write. And that's first person, right? And then it kind of comes out of that.
Yeah, I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Does anyone have any, last lingering questions in our 3 minutes left with Amy? And it's okay if not.
It's okay. No pressure.
I feel like we've talked about a lot of things all across
Yeah,
the board
I threw
too.
a lot of
I
things out.
really appreciate all of you're an expert in so many things. We could have had 20 swarm sessions with you.
Oh, that's awesome. I did want to share that Kofi link that I
Yeah,
have. It's
that's what
got
I'm
all my
saying.
stuff. There's this like and a bunch of stuff that that you can participate. There's free things on there. There's not free things. That's what I'll say. But I am developing a course around this for people who want to get better at it, basically, and come at it from different approaches. And it is something that's a journey that I want to go on with more people because they say they need it. So,
Well,
I,
I'm going to make sure since not everybody joined here live, this is going to stream on YouTube. It's actually streaming right now. I'm guessing that that will mean that there's a recording on there. If not, I'll be uploading the recording because I'll be getting it in my email because I'm also recording on Zoom. But if you're not here live right now and watching this, Amy's links will be in the follow-up email for everybody that is on the Swarm session reminder list or is registered for the session. If you are not in either of those groups, maybe you're watching this later, maybe you're just not subscribed to that, go ahead and shoot me an email and I'll get you all of the goodies from Amy and connect you with her. I'll give you all of her contact information, not like her social security card. Like I'll give you her email and I'll
address,
these two
phone
links
number.
that she sent me, and I think you sent me a handout that we're gonna link, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah.
if if you don't receive that email for some reason, please let me know and I'm happy to send that out. If you would like to hear more from Amy, her contact information will be there. If you have, sat here and thought that there was something that you really took something away from, please let me know. If there's something you want to hear more about, please let me know so we can plan more Swarm sessions with Amy or people like Amy. But Amy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone that came, Alex and
Thank you.
Monty. I know this was a really, really small group. It always fluctuates depending on, time and people's schedules and all kinds of stuff. So thank you for your patience, Amy, as we had a slow start with people coming in, but this was a fun session. I really, really liked talking about this. I think it's probably one of the most important things that we talk about is, our mental health while we're writing. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to bless us with your knowledge.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. This has been a great experience.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to send you an email to connect further because I would like to have a coffee chat. Alex, I will see you at future Swarm sessions, I believe. Monty, I will see you at future Swarm sessions, and we're meeting monthly now for coffee. So I love it. I will see all of you very soon.